Good morning, everyone. It's Belinda Weaver here. I am very pleased to kick off this fine Tuesday with a very special guest. I am being joined by Helen Fletcher, UK copywriter, and I am going to be picking her brain about working with small businesses because Helen is a UK copywriter who declares that she works with small and local businesses, but there are awesome bits of that and there are challenges. So I'm going to bring Helen on and we are going to dig into the pleasures and the pitfalls of working with small businesses. Hello, Helen.
Hello, good afternoon from sunny Wales.
Yes, it's nice. We were just comparing sunlight in our different offices, the California and the Welsh sunlight. But let's get the ball rolling. Can you introduce yourself to everyone, who you are, what you do, and who you serve?
I am Helen. I'm Helen Fletcher. My business is Helen Writes. So I have been writing for about 5 years now. And I very proudly market that I work with small businesses. That is my target market. And I love working with them, even though there are some pitfalls, I will admit.
And that's what we're going to get into. But how did you get to the point of declaring this is who I love working with? Because more often than not, when we start as copywriters, we're like, I'm just going to work with everyone until I figure it out. But there's a lot of pressure to declare a niche. And even the small business niche is still pretty broad. So how did you get to that?
Well, I started my business working in regional Australia, so I was in quite a small town, but it had a lot of very exciting small businesses. And I'd come from the corporate world, I'd done all the corporate thing, and I'd moved to this town, and I just said to my husband, like, these are the people I want to work with. They are fantastic businesses, they're entrepreneurs, they've got so much passion, but oh my gosh, they could not market themselves. And I was looking at what they were writing and their words, and for me, it was very passion driven, which I don't think is a particularly bad way to approach a new business. So I started working in regional Australia. I worked with these small businesses and I loved it. So I guess it just grew from there. And I'm not going to lie, I have been through this whole curve of I need to get bigger. I need to earn more money. I need to get bigger clients. And I was there maybe 18 months ago. And I've got to admit, I just came back to small businesses because it was just what I enjoyed more. And that's what makes me happy. And this is why I started the business. So I think that's a very personal thing, though.
I love that. And I love that what we're going to be getting into today is there are really awesome parts of that choice. And it is really important to choose people you love to work with and that fit with your life as well, because you've got a young child. And, you know, most of us get into copywriting for more time, choice, and freedom. And then, like you mentioned, there's that little pervasive angle to our conversation where we're like, how do I earn more? Do I need bigger clients? Should I be getting sexy ass brands? And it can create a lot of pressure. So I love the fact that you've gone, no, actually, I'm choosing to work with the people who I love to work with, and also the people who fit with my life and how much I want to work and how I want to work. So what would you say the best bits of working with small and local businesses are?
I think you've already touched on some there. It's the flexibility. You build a much stronger relationship so that you can say, oh, look, I'm so sorry, Sophie, or whatever, my kid's not well today, so my deadline's going to get pushed back. And you've built this relationship with them and she totally gets it, for example. This is not a real person. And I think that was very important to me at the beginning because my little boy was quite young when I started. I used to take my little boy along to meetings with me and people were very cool about it all. But for me, over time, it's just become it's that ability to really get into a business and make a real difference and see the difference. I'm not part of a bigger machine. A lot of them haven't worked with many freelancers before. And even during the briefing, I can see them having these aha moments because you're asking questions that they've not had before. They've not thought about it. And I really feel like I'm making a difference, which is what drives me. And that's what I enjoy doing.
That's awesome. And that's, it's a really important point because sometimes we hear these things said, like, I'm doing this to make a difference. And the reality is, more often than not, we're doing it to pay the bills and we're doing it to have a fulfilling career. But I also remember those conversations after the briefing process where people were like, this has changed the way I'm thinking about my business.
Yeah.
And that does make you feel good and really, really motivated as well.
Yeah, and I often say to clients, I said, the briefing process alone, you'll get value from it, because I'm going to be asking you questions that you're going to be able to bear in mind and use in other parts of your business. A lot of the time we nail a USP, which they might not even realize was a USP before, a unique selling point. They might have gone, I didn't realize that was so different, but I've worked with so many businesses now. I'm like, I know what you're doing is different. And we're going to promote this and we're going to sell it. So.
I love it. All right. Well, so we've got the best bits there, which I love. And let's get into the challenges. So obviously working with big clients, sexy brands, small clients, local business, like any niche you have will have its own challenges. And what I'd love to do is dig into those so that copywriters watching this going, I think I'd like to just stick with working with small businesses, can have an eye on them, but also know that they can overcome them. So what would you say is your first big challenge with working with small businesses?
For me, it's definitely that a lot of small businesses haven't worked with a freelancer before, and most definitely haven't worked with a copywriter before. I've not had any clients that have worked with copywriters before so far in 5 years. So they tend to find me through social media or word of mouth. So they kind of know what I do, but they're not really 100% sure what I do. Like, I write things. So at the very beginning, you have to do a lot of hand holding, you do a lot of nurturing, you do a lot of explaining. So when you're pricing out a job for small local businesses, I tend to factor in a little bit more admin time, because you will be spending more time hand holding. I would argue it's worth it in the end, because once they understand what you do, the process is much simpler, but you have to nail that at the beginning. There's no point getting halfway through the project and then going, oh, well, I didn't say I would do this. And then you get a bit of scope creep, and you have to be very clear. A lot of businesses don't even realize that copywriters have different niches. So some people might say, do you do Facebook ads? And I will say, well, no, that's not what I do. I tend to do websites and brochures and that kind of, I don't do Facebook ads and different niches. So yeah, it's definitely trying to explain to people what you do and your boundaries and how the process works.
Absolutely, because it's that whole idea, like you were saying, like, I need someone to write the words, and someone's told me that Helen can help me with that, but then it's like a big chasm of uncertainty. And one of the things that we can do as freelancers, as service providers, as copywriters, is make people feel safe in the next steps of going forward. And that's explaining the process. This is how it works. This is how I work. This is what you do. This is what I do. And I think explaining that over and over again just helps people go, right, got it. Now I know what's going on.
And I didn't do that at the beginning. I'm not going to lie. I was very green. I hadn't found you yet. And I would just say, oh, yeah, I can write this thing. But I suppose I didn't know the processes myself at that stage. That was something I learned at the time. But it's definitely that making them feel safe. I think that you've absolutely nailed that terminology there. That's what it is. I have recent clients, I can just reel the process off so clearly now. I can see them instantly relaxing and getting this trust and going, okay, I know what's expected of me now. Because a lot of clients as well don't realize that at some point they're going to be presented with a pretty hefty document that they've got to proofread. And I'm going to give you 14 days to do that.
Yeah.
And if you want to stay on track, we've got to get that done. So
yes. And even the brief, it's like, this is a document that's going to take a bit of time to complete. Then we're going to get on the phone and we're going to talk about it. Then I'm going to give you lots of copy that you need to make time to review. So yes, setting those expectations. And I just want to loop back to something you said. And you said making sure there's a little bit of extra time in your proposal for admin, because the reason that's important is because you don't want to start resenting people. Like, oh my God, do I have to get on the phone again? But if it's all there in your original quote, then you don't resent that little bit of extra admin, because we're always talking about streamlining processes to make our business more profitable. And we should absolutely be doing that. But working with people who have never worked with a copywriter absolutely requires a little bit of extra.
I also want to say as well, there's a tendency with small businesses to go, oh, they're only small, I'll skip a bit of the process. Do never skip the process. Always do the briefing. Always do everything as you do it. Otherwise, you get tripped up along the line.
Yes, and especially with that commencement invoice, it's very tempting to go, oh, well, we'll just get started. We'll just start. Yeah, so that's a great tip. Never skip a step. Never skip a step. All right, what would you say the next big challenge of working with small businesses is?
Well, I'm actually going to be a bit cheeky and steal someone from the Confident Copywriters Group's challenge, which I think is so good. B has been in touch today on the group talking about, hi B, if you're there, juggling the clients, because you tend to have more clients if they're smaller clients, because to make your money, your monthly income, you probably are going to have more because they got smaller budgets. So there is a juggle with having multiple clients and a lot more admin. Look, at the beginning, I just juggled them all, I'm not going to lie, but I think as I've kind of become more confident as I've gone on, what I've done is try to turn the smaller clients into retainer clients who keep coming back to me and using me for multiple projects, which has been so much quicker and easier for them and quicker and easier for me because I can write for them quicker and I know them and the relationship's already there. So, and I've got no qualms reaching out to previous clients saying, do you want anything doing? I've noticed that this page might need a bit of an update. Would you like me to help with that? And I think that's where that relationship comes from, which you might not get with bigger clients, but with smaller clients, you can dip in and out. And, you know, you should have the confidence to do that, which will come, yeah.
And I love that, you know, that's a much easier conversation to have where you flip someone into either a regular retainer agreement that's structured, or you just become their go-to resource, because once you get to know them, you can actually cut a little bit of that admin time that you put into the first project, which becomes a price incentive and a really easy win, because you say, look, if we move to this agreement, I notice you've been asking me for work pretty much every month. What I can do is I can offer you a price incentive to formalize this agreement, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I've just actually I wrote a website for one of my first clients 5 years ago, and we've just rewritten the entire website. In fact, she's got 2 websites now. It's a massive project, but she has saved time because I've worked with her for 5 years. I don't need a detailed briefing for 2 to 3 hours. Not as much research because I know the topic inside out. So massive project for me. It's still very lucrative, but for her, probably a bit less than going to obviously another copywriter.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say hi to Imay and hello to Aman, who's also tuning in. And Imay says, I find it hard sometimes as a client will be a small business and I want to help them with a reasonable price, but then having to do a lot more work with them because they're small, they've never worked with a copywriter before, and that's a real balance. So I would I'm going to throw a third challenge at you. How do you manage that kind of price point shock? Because, you know, when I work with people I've never worked with before, I don't really know how much stuff costs. So how do you do that? How do you manage that?
Again, this came with confidence over time. I used to just give people a price, which was probably too low at the beginning, and not explain it. Now I know how to explain my value. So I'm not giving people a price. I'm explaining what I can do to help your business. And we have a very long discovery call, usually longer than the 50 minutes I've planned. So it's usually half an hour while I explain, this is what I've done before. This is how I can help you. Here are some examples if you want to see them. But a lot of people aren't too bothered about that. So the price point shock comes down a little bit when they understand how many hours I'm putting in, the research, tone of voice, SEO, any little add-ons you've got really helps add value to your price point. Ultimately, though, a small business is going to be shocked by the price. I'm a small business. I see prices that people quote me and I go, oh my gosh. I think as long as you can keep the conversation open, and I usually on my proposals say, if you want to discuss your budget, or if you want to talk about amending the proposal in any way, I don't offer to drop my fees, but I will always give the option to change the scope a little bit.
Yes, which is a great tip for everyone watching. Whenever you have a client who balks at your initial price, don't negotiate and start discounting, negotiate the scope, because if they have $500 and they want $2,000 worth of work, that's a mismatch. But you can provide them a project for the $500 that they have. or whatever it is. So that's a great way to get the project rolling. And one thing I'll say about budget, usually if you ask someone, what's your budget? Like, I don't know. I don't really have a budget. But every business will have a budget once they see some numbers. Like, oh, yeah, it's not that much. It's absolutely not that much. And so one thing you can do as well is start throwing out ballpark figures early on in the conversation. Is that what you do? Or do you do it in the proposal?
I never used to because I was too scared that they'd run away. But I think, but now I haven't really got time to put together a proposal. They take a lot of time. It is a bit of admin. So in the kind of 15-minute discovery call, I'll throw out a number and say, this is what you can expect. You don't have to tell me now if it's going to fit, but maybe drop me an email afterwards to let me know. I don't like to put people on the spot, because it can be a bit awkward. But I've also got on my website, like a 3-page website starts at, but most people just like to talk to you. They don't like to read websites.
Yes, it's true. That's so true. But the point there is, just because you've got it on your website doesn't mean people will know it, doesn't mean they'll read it. But I think seeding the ballpark figures early on in conversations, in emails or on the phone, is a really good idea to help people get used to the kind of numbers. And another thing you can also say is, like, this is an industry standard. So if you will find cheaper copywriters, however, there is always a compromise to be made. And I think if you can always pitch your prices as industry standard, then that lets people know, oh, this is not top of the range. This is what I'm going to find with any decent copywriter that I'm going to work with. So I think that's a really good point. So I'm going to throw a question in. This is Sean, and Sean's in the free Facebook group, and Laura and Crystal also say hi in the free Facebook group. But Sean asks, how do you manage the multiple niches that you might encounter with small businesses?
Oh, like the different industries and different.
Yes.
Oh, I quite enjoy that, actually. I really like having a bit of a change of scenery. I work with, I'm trying to think of clients I've had recently. I've had a few like financial coaches, dentists, physios, mostly service providers. So there's always some kind of similarities between them all. And when it comes to putting a website together for them, which is what I mostly do, generally the process is the same. I've just got to get into their niche and I've got to understand it. I love learning about different businesses and industries. So I just find that really interesting. The main thing is, like I said at the beginning, don't skip any processes and do a briefing. Don't think you're saving yourself any time or saving them money. What you're doing is creating a massive headache. I would tend to have like an hour and a half to a 2-hour briefing session, especially for a new industry that I've not worked with before.
Yeah.
For kind of 4 to 6 websites, similar.
And I actually used to love the variety that came with, because when I started, I was definitely at small businesses. I love the variety. And I found my friends became very interested in what I was working on, because it could be insurance or finance or someone who picked up dog poo for other people. Like, there was always such a variety. Yeah, that's a long project. But there could be so many different industries. And I think one of the things I always loved is being able to be that new person where I was like, I'm going to ask all the really basic questions, because a client coming to this with a problem is going to have all these questions. So you're actually in a really good place to be.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. You're in the audience, aren't you? You've got to be the audience. So you're asking the right questions to get the website looking clear. I had a recent client and she sent me her sample copy that she'd written. And I just thought, well, I don't really understand this. I didn't know the industry, but so I got to unpick that to the point where I got to clarify all the points and make the copy a lot clearer for everybody. So so
you can actually use it to your advantage.
Yeah, I think so.
And and we always say you don't actually know how to create a self-managed super fund to be able to explain the benefits of a self-managed super fund to someone who doesn't know. So, all right. So we've covered when your clients haven't worked with a copywriter before and the fact that you need to guide them through your process. We've covered working with lots of little clients and the scheduling and project management that can be involved versus 1 or 2 bigger projects. We've talked about price point and how to seed the price point so that your clients have realistic expectations of how much it costs for a copywriter to do an awesome job. What would you say is another challenge?
I think, unfortunately, with some businesses, you've got to know when to pull the pin.
Yes.
There's going to be some projects which don't go your way. And when it's a small business, it's really hard because you can get quite invested in them and you become quite attached to clients. But ultimately, if a project's going on for too long, if things aren't getting delivered on time, you've got to know when to kind of walk away from that and walk away from it in a civil way where you're not going to begrudge it. I would never recommend refunding all the money or anything like that, but you've got to know when to draw the line in the sand and go, look, I recommend we finish this relationship now.
Yes. So how do you said going on too long. What about scope creep? I was just thinking, like, what are the red flags that make you go, no, it's time to end this? Because I know, in my experience, I'm like, if I just work harder, I can fix this. If I just do more, then I can turn this around. And there are some projects where you're like, you can turn it around between version 1 and version 2.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pull a client back and they can end up ecstatic about your work. But the mistake I have always made is this: I just love them more. We can turn this around. So what are these big red flags that make you go, no, I'm hitting a board?
I've got to be honest, I've not really had too many, luckily, in my life. So I have been quite lucky with that. I've actually worked with some agencies, which is a bit different, but yeah, those are the ones that I've tended to walk away from because there's unrealistic expectations about timings. And that's where I've had to say, well, no, my week is scheduled in advance. You don't get to just drop things on me last minute. And that's the same with timings. If a client is making you wait 3-4 weeks for a turnaround, they've got to understand that that's creeping into someone else's project then, and you're not going to get a quick turnaround from me. Scope creep, I am pretty tight on that nowadays. I tend to reply very civilly saying, look, I understand you want this extra work doing, and without even going into conversation, I'll say this is how much it's going to cost.
Love it.
And then they usually say they don't want it.
Which is fine.
Absolutely fine. Projects going a bit awry, it tends to come from the client not knowing what they want at the beginning, though, I find, and getting that brief nailed. Small businesses would sometimes see a copy deck and go, that's not what I expected at all. But that's because they've not been able to kind of vocalize what they expected at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of have to reflect that back on them a little bit without making it seem like passive aggressive, but you didn't tell me this at the beginning. I would suggest maybe in that circumstance, you take version 1 of the copy, you pay me X amount, and then I can suggest some of the copywriters you can work with.
Yeah, and I love that point because, it just highlights the need of a strong process and explaining the process and reiterating the process. So you are the project lead, you are guiding them through and making them feel safe. But there is a point, like you mentioned, don't give a full refund. If there's a point where you're like, we're breaking for one reason or another, this project is ending before we both thought it would, to work out a pro rata, whatever that is, where you say, I've done 70% of the work, or I've done 60, 70, 80%. And so I can actually, let's work out an agreed price where you get what has been done so far and I get paid for the work. But sometimes there's that point where you have to go, I have to save my sanity. So I'm going to get paid up to the point I've done. And just, is it freezing?
Sorry, no, I just lost you now. I'm back.
No, that's all right. Yeah, it's done that to me a few times as well. So I'm just going, oh, there we go. But yeah, so if you're having a project that's going off track, you try and get it back on track. But if it needs to break, you don't beat yourself up about it. You just work out how much time you've spent, talk to the client about it, try and get a quick win where they pay you and then you walk away, but save your sanity because it's just not worth it.
It's like a weight's lifted as well when you walk away from a client that's not worth, because you do take the stuff to bed with you and you can't help it. It turns, you think, I've got to deal with this person tomorrow, I've got to email them again. And sometimes you just got to go away. It's a good thing, though. It's a gut reaction. I think you've got to know when to go.
And it's also some in confident copywriting, when we have a member who goes, I've had to sack my first client, everyone goes, yay, it's a milestone. Like, we're not celebrating that moment, but everyone has these moments and it's okay. All it is smoothing out your process. So when you have a tricky moment as a copywriter, celebrate that as like, okay, I've had this now. I've done this now. I can chalk it up to the experiences I am prepared for and move on. So, yeah, we don't like to talk about it, but it absolutely happens. So what would you say the last big challenge, if you had to name one?
I think it's not been a big challenge for me, but I do see it in the group that we're in. It's getting money out of people, perhaps, trying to get the money over the line. And I'll admit, when I started, I didn't have the process for that. I kind of waited for the project to finish, and then I'd be like, hey, here's my invoice, by the way. Now, when I send out the proposal, I have a very clear process. You'll get your 50% invoice for most projects, 50% invoice at this stage, and your final invoice after the second draft has been sent. And what that does, it almost takes the responsibility off me, because the process is there. It's set in stone. I just follow the process, and I do it very robotically now. I'm like, okay, send it out. It's time to send it. I used to get very emotionally attached to sending invoices and feel guilty about it.
Yeah, which I really applaud you for mentioning, because it just highlights some of the junk we have around money. Like, we can rationally go, we've done the work, we deserve to be paid, but then flicking over to going, no, you now need to pay me, and I'm going to ask for that money without any emotional head junk involved, takes a bit of practice.
It is practice. Yeah, you're right. It's absolutely practice. And now I can just send an invoice off, like, without even thinking about it, because it's just done. I tend to get the invoices drafted at the beginning of the process, or put them into Stripe or whatever. So they're there ready to go. I can schedule things. I will say that working with small businesses, I've had more trouble getting paid by an agency than I have from small businesses, because small businesses tend to respect small businesses more. And I've had really positive experiences so far of being paid. I very rarely have to chase anyone. So I say that's one of the positives of working with them, actually. They're very respectful, and they tend to pay quite quickly. But
and I've often found that even just going, oh, look, the invoice was due yesterday, being able to speak to the owner of the business, or at least someone in a very small team, they'll go, oh my gosh, I'm like, we just lost track of it, rather than like, oh no, that's going to the accounts department and we have no control over when you will get paid.
Yeah.
That's always tricky. So yeah, I love speaking to the owner of the business and getting their passion. And as you said, it's just a more cohesive small business support vibe.
Actually, building on that, one thing I would always recommend as well, which I've done with a few clients this week, chasing them up, always get the testimonials off these people, because they give you the best testimonials.
Yeah. So when do you ask for testimonials?
I tend to mention it earlier on, like at the end of the process. If it's okay, I'd love to get your feedback, or if they've given me something nice in an email halfway through the project, I'll say, oh, would you mind if we use this at the end? I've got a Google review link that I can send you. I keep it really informal, and I make it clear how appreciative I am of any comments. I know writing a testimonial for a copywriter is everyone's worst nightmare.
Right?
Oh my gosh, the amount of people have said to me, I hate writing testimonials for you, Helen. So I will write questions. I'll make it super simple, template it, anything, because they usually got the nicest things to say, my clients, and they just need a bit of help getting them on paper or writing them.
Yes, because it's important to remember that people hire a copywriter because they are challenged in some capacity getting it onto the paper. And so the easier you can make it to collect their thoughts and ideas, the better. And of course, you get great testimonials. You do good work. And I just want to highlight, June asked a question, and it's not coming up, June, but June has asked, do you get paid upfront a portion? And you mentioned 50% upfront, right?
I follow the confident copywriting template, of course, which I learned many years ago when I joined. Yep, so 50% the start of the project, it's like a briefing stage, and then 50% after the second draft has been sent.
Yes.
So, and that just goes off automatically. I don't think about it. I do it as separate emails. I wouldn't add an invoice or mention an invoice as part of something else. I make sure it's a very clear, distinct, separate email so nothing gets lost.
Yes.
But that's pretty standard now.
Yeah. And that upfront is to get the project locked into your schedule.
Yeah, exactly. That's
nothing happens.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead now, you need to pay this up front, and then you're locked in.
And those kind of things as well is another opportunity for you to go, this is completely industry standard, which is why groups like Confident Copywriting and other groups are so great, because when we synchronize our processes a little bit, or align them, I should say, it means as an industry, when people go around, everyone does the same thing in terms of getting upfront payments and getting invoices and managing revisions and stuff like that. So it's not a shocker and it's not unreasonable. It's just the industry benchmark for how things happen.
And if you don't have that, you can be waiting sometimes for weeks, because projects with small businesses can sometimes roll on a bit because they take a bit of time to get back to you. You need that cash up front. You need to have it locked in, but also for your own income, and you need to keep that rolling. So
yeah, everyone, like, when you've got a bit of skin in the game, when I say skin, I mean money, you're much more motivated to do the things that need to be done. And June asked, do you show your prospective clients some other web copy from great sites to see if it's what they had in mind? So I think what June's asking, like, do you like this copy or that copy, or tone of voice and things like that?
I do that for some clients. Mostly I ask them for examples of what they love, because they tend to come to me with a set idea. Usually they've seen something they love.
Yes.
Most of them have seen something they went, I want to replicate that. So I ask them for 3 to 5 websites. And then in the first draft of the copy, sometimes I throw a few little sideballs in there with my tone, just to see how they take to it. Some will say, I love this bit. Some will say, no, this is wrong. And that kind of gives you a sense. They're not always, I find with small businesses, they don't always give you a great direction on tone of voice, because they're not really sure what they want. They tend to say, well, I like what you've done for someone else. Can you just do that?
Yes, exactly. And that's it. I know that in a lot of my first couple of years of writing copy for small businesses, I would say, how do you want to sound? Like, let's talk about the tone of voice. And they would say friendly, conversational, professional.
Professional, yeah.
Yeah. And that's fine. Like, this is because we as copywriters, we're all up in the tone of voice. Is it dependable or authoritative, or is it, edgy, or is it quirky? We can have lots of different words about it, but as a business, they don't have that language, or not used to having those conversations. And so that when it's helpful for us to ask them what they mean by that. What does professional look like for you?
Yeah, so that's where you'd come up with some examples, maybe, of like, this would be quirky and this would be more serious. Which one do you want?
Yes.
I think sometimes businesses say they want to go quirky, but when you show them quirky, they don't.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And this is a common, when people haven't worked with copywriters before, they think they want something. And then when you deliver it, and this is especially my experience around edgy, or we want to sound different than anyone else. And then they see it and they're like, oh, yeah, actually, no, we don't want to sound different at all. And this is just one of the things of working with businesses with who haven't worked with a copywriter. And it's, again, going back to your process, closing the loops, making it easy for them, and being the guide that they need.
You can always send off sample copy as well. For recently, I did send off some sample copy for a client, just to say, is this along the right lines in terms of tone? And that was a good process, actually, because she said, yeah, nailed it. So perfect.
Awesome. All right. On that note, Helen, I want to thank you for your time today, because I think this has been a really interesting insight into working with smaller businesses, because sometimes we chase the big projects and they have their own pitfalls and pleasures. But I love the variety. I love the opportunity to make a difference. I love the relationship building that you've broken down for working with small businesses. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm just going to put, hang on, I've got my fancy banners up that I've been putting up. This is your website. And so it's also in the comments around this. If people want to go and check you out, that's your website. Connect with Helen. You're also Confident Copywriter. So you're my Confident Copywriter in the spotlight for this month. And I'm sharing you around all over the place. But thank you very much for sharing your insight. You do awesome work.
If anyone's got any questions, feel free to get in touch as well. I'm always happy to help out.
Yeah, that's it. We make each other better by helping each other out.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
your evening, my friend, and I'll see you in the group.
Have a lovely day. Bye.